need to talk about one of the core model. We need to talk about this one, like an apple core. This one is the core model of events, and all events and all pattern forms can be found in this core model. Okay, let's look at this master pattern. This is the core model. So, tessellation, a core shape. If you put two together, you can tile your way across the ground. In fact, the original tiles were made as tessellations because they're not square and they'll slip a little bit, and it means you don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. But then you can actually be very asymmetrical, and you can change the shape a lot. And stretch your way across the surface. And this is how the cracking pattern is with the hexagon, but this is actually easier to draw because it's a quite interesting thing to stretch your way across a landscape or a surface, just playing the tessellation game with the core model. Now, if we put two together, they're roughly the same size, and we wrap them round each other, you actually make a ball. A tennis ball, if you take it apart on the seams, is two tessellations joined together. So here's the shape that forms the sphere, or the perfect ball if they're perfectly symmetrical, but there's no perfection out there, everything's slightly different. But if you turn that sideways and have a look at that, you get one of these, a yin-yang pattern. And then if you overlay that with another one, you get one of these, which is a swastika pattern. And then if you go the other way and you overlay one of these, you get one of these, which is the infinity pattern. And then if you go one more, you get one of those, which is actually the tessellation and if we just separate it a little bit, it's like a giant tree with the canopy almost coming to the ground and the root net almost coming to the surface. And that's what a tree is. That's how a tree pattern is. It is the core model. These are the symbols of humanity that have been a representation of nature in its most concise form. And any traditional people that have worshipped nature have always had these patterns representing the different forms. So here we can see a very traditional representation. Here we see a tessellation across the surface. There's our core model starting to emerge as we slightly separate this one here. But let's have a look at your backbone and all invertebrates' backbones. They are all a set of tessellations. There's a backbone. Here is your shoulder bone, right here. In fact, your leg bone and your joints on your knee, going down to the joints on your ankle and all the way across your feet, they're all tessellations. You are a set of tessellations in your skeleton. Three-dimensionally jointed into a three-dimensional set of joint tessellation connections. So from here we can start to look at how does the energy flow through a system like this. If this is a flow of energy, how does that work? Well, there's actually a detonation point here, like a seed germinating with a tree. It's actually exploding out as a detonation away from the origin. And there are energies coming through the living explosion. It's a living explosion, but all explosions are like this, because in the 3D, this is a torus. This is a cross-section I'm drawing here. So if this is an explosion, it's actually exploding like a donut in all directions. It's torusing from the center out. So it's literally like a donut with a point of origin and energy coming up and then torusing in all directions away. So when we look at a tree, there are gathering points from one side coming right through to the other. So, and through the point of origin. So you find that a tree, if we look at it actually as a circle, it has a gather of, is a streamline of nutrient coming from the roots through the point of germination and over to the opposite side of the branches. And there we have, we've scribed that same pattern again. We've scribed the yin-yang pattern from one side to the other. And you're going the opposite way through the point of germination to the other side. And here's the infinity pattern coming up. And it's at the point of germination that minerals going up and sugars coming down in two different directions spiral through streamlines. So this is actually spiraling. So we've got the outside to the inside, from the inside to the outside, from inside the roots to outside the branches, from outside the branches to inside the roots, traveling through the point of germination where the switch point occurs. And these are spiraling events. Sugars going down, minerals going up. Streamline curves coming through. If you track the flow, this is exactly what's going on. That is exactly what happens in an explosion. But with a tree, it's a productive explosion. It actually produces wood. It produces material. Top to bottom, it is collecting and distributing. So it's going in and it's going out. It's going out and it's going in. This is actually quite common in nature. Water and gases, in this case, going in both directions. There's a two-way trading around the extremities Around the extremities, there's a two-way trading event. Around the edges. And we're going to do a lot of edge thinking in this course. I'm going to start to talk to you about edges pretty soon. And the boundaries and why boundaries and edges are so important and why where so much trade goes on. So this is the same pattern in a tornado. This is the same pattern in whirlpools. This is the same pattern in trees. This is a core pattern. We can find, by dissecting this pattern, we can find waves. By dissecting this pattern, we can find spheres. By dissecting this pattern, we can find scatters. Of course we can find branching patterns. It's tree, right? But it's the same in a whirlpool. It's the same in a tornado. There are so many patterns that make this same form. And when you cut sections through them, you can find all the known patterns. The tree rings, when you cut the trunk, the tree rings actually record drought. They record fire. They record wind by being offset. They record changes in weather because of the pressures scribed and left behind with the spherical shaped ring. And trees themselves are ascending spirals of branches and branchlets to leaves. So here you need to start to understand the importance of pattern, and I better put an N on the end of pattern because it's not patter, it's pattern, and realize there is a core model pattern at the center of this understanding.
Gerardus Mercator was a 16th century Belgian cartographer and geographer, who is most renowned for creating the 1569 world map based on a new projection which represented sailing courses of constant bearing as straight lines. In the bottom left corner, we see a close-up of the Arctic, showing what appears to be a large mountain with 4 rivers diverging. This is in fact a smaller representation of Mercator's Arctic map titled Of the Northern Lands. On this map, he envisions the center as a large black rock, the Rupes Nigra, surrounded by a great whirlpool into which 4 powerful rivers flow. These rivers divide a large landmass into 4 distinct islands. When the English polymath John Dee wrote to Mercator asking about his sources for this map, Mercator returned with a letter stating, "In the midst of the 4 countries is a whirlpool, into which there empty these 4 indrawing seas which divide the north. Right under the pole there lies a bare rock in the midst of the sea, and it is all of magnetic stone." A giant magnetic rock, exactly at the North Pole. Well, that would explain why all compasses point north, wouldn't it? If we are to look at the false heliocentric system with 2 magnetic poles, we should become very wary very quickly, because all compasses point north all the time. If we supposedly live on a globe with a south pole, why is the pole always north? When one travels further in the southern hemisphere, why wouldn't compasses point south? The North Pole is north, underneath the North Star Polaris, at the center of the flat Earth shining down on Rupes Nigra, or, as I like to call it by its Vedic name, the magnetic Mount Meru. Like many of the ancient systems, Vedic cosmology knew the Earth was flat, with a center axis, envisioned the universe as a sort of round chandelier, with the luminaries revolving above, and most importantly, with a center universal column on which we find Mount Meru. Here it is, in the center of Bhumandala, is the circular island of Jambudvipa, which represents Earth, with 9 Varsha subdivisions. In the center stands the cone-shaped Mount Meru, which represents the world axis and is surmounted by the city of Brahma, the universal creator. Could this center landform be the same divided island found in Mercator's map? Could Mount Meru be the Rubus Nigra? And could the city of the god Brahma be a reference to the inner earth city of Shambhala?
There are many cosmological traditions around the world which share important features of Bhagavata cosmology. These include a cosmic axial mountain or pillar, which is often identified with a local mountain, such as Mount Olympus in Greece. These traditions also include other standard features, including those shown in this generic world model. The cosmology of the Bhagavatam and the Puranas is shared in its broad features by Buddhism, and it is widespread in the Buddhist countries of Asia. This East Asian picture depicts a square version of Mount Meru and the oceans and islands of Bhumandala, surmounted by planetary orbits. This Korean wheel map shows a central continent surrounded by a circular ocean and another circular continent. Joseph Needham, in his treatise on Chinese science, traces these wheel maps to India or Babylon. Here is a Babylonian wheel map. Wheel maps were also made in medieval Europe. In these Judeo-Christian maps, Jerusalem and the sacred hill called Mount Zion were identified as the world axis. Somehow or other, the tradition of Jambudvip seems to have influenced Gerardus Mercator, who placed a mountain surrounded by a circular continent at the north pole of his map of the Arctic region. The 4 perpendicular rivers or channels flowing from the central mountain correspond to the 4 branches of the celestial Ganges flowing from Mount Meru. Here is a Phoenician seal with a personified world mountain and 4 streams issuing forth at right angles. The Dogon tribe, living near the upper bend of the Niger River, posit a circular continent with a central pillar surmounted by the residence of their high god, Amma. Note the world-girdling serpent in the circular ocean. The ethnologist Evans Wentz identifies this Navajo sand painting as a representation of the 4 sacred directional mountains of the Navajos. In many traditions, the world mountain is surrounded by 4 mountains in the cardinal directions, and we also see this in the Bhagavatam and other Puranas. The color scheme is similar to that found in Puranic and Buddhist traditions. The 4 directional mountains of Jambudvip have 4 sacred trees on their summits. These include the Jambu tree, after which Jambudvip is named. The theme of a cosmic tree of life is very common, and this tree often grows on the world mountain or stands in place of it. Here we see the Scandinavian tree of life called Yggdrasil. The apocryphal biblical literature describes a tree of life with 4 rivers of honey, milk, oil, and wine that flow down into Eden. For comparison, the Bhagavatam has rivers of special juices flowing from its 4 sacred trees. This Assyrian seal shows the tree of life on the world mountain, plus 2 sacred streams. In this East Asian picture, the tree of life stands upon the column of Mount Meru, centered on the ring pattern of Bhumandala. The Mayans of Central America have a tree of life that extends through 7 heavens, and they also speak of 5 lower worlds. Graded heavens and underworlds are found in many cosmologies, including that of the Bhagavatam. Here we see the cosmology of the Shipibo tribe of the Peruvian Montea. This includes the tree of life, the circular continent and surrounding ocean, and the world-girdling serpent. The cosmology of the Warao of the Orinoco Delta also features a serpent of being that surrounds their world. Here we see the Norse serpent that surrounds Midgard the inhabited world of Norse cosmology. The Bhagavatam places a universal serpent called Anantashesha beneath Bhumandala. He is generally depicted as supporting the earth from beneath, but the Mahabharata also says that he encircles her in his coils. The Bhagavatam places the cities of Brahma and the 8 Lokapalas on top of Mount Meru. Similarly, many traditions place the abode of the gods on top of their axial mountain or pillar. Here is the geometric layout of the cities of the 8 Lokapalas, or world guardians. These figure in the Vastu Purusha mandala used to lay out temples in traditional Indian architecture. The grid of the Vastu Purusha mandala is also associated with the nakshatra constellations marking the ecliptic. Thus the earthly side of a temple was connected with the heavenly realm of the ecliptic.
In essence, started with the cosmic egg, okay? Right, and that's the earth running diametrically across, right? And down the center is what we'd call the axis, okay, which is a torus, a vortex. And this links us inside our universe with the multiverse on the outside. And this is also what creates all the motions within our earth. And it's diametrically across, right, down the middle is where earth would be. The plane of the earth is halfway in between. Similar to, if we had to do it like that, the earth would be in the middle, okay, running across, and that's the shell. And now earth runs symmetrically, and within this space is where we have the planets and everything else. And there are layers to the universe as well, which I'll show you. And according to a lot of ancient cultures, the heavens were always divided into 4s. So if you look at Vedic cosmology, they say that there are 4 transcendental spiritual heavens, being the Mahaloka, Yanaloka, Tapaloka, and the Brahmaloka. And Brahma being where everything began from. All right? So it looks something like that. That's what we see. So we're seeing the earth, then we're seeing the toroidal fields, and then we're seeing the heavenly realms at the top, which are different galaxies, if you want to think of it from scientific terms, you know, the different heavens. And below us is water, the great deep. So this earth is sitting on waters, which is the turtle that we always see in ancient depictions of the earth sitting on a turtle. The turtle depicts water. So that's the Gabadoka Ocean, according to the Vedics, that the earth sits on. And then below you've got 4 hellish realms, as above, so below. Everything's always symmetrical in nature. There's a pattern to everything. There's a system and a pattern.
The swastika is the image made by the Big Dipper's movement throughout the seasons. It is the sign of the pole, thus of the rotational movement which is achieved around the center of the immutable axis mundi.
Let's look at the North Star. The North Star Polaris remains stationary over the North Pole. Below it stands the axis mundi, the cosmic pillar Mount Meru. The North Star is a reminder of the pole's fixed energy, whereas all other stars are in consistent motion, turning like a wheel around Polaris. And I quote, "The pole star is the axle of the universe, and the earth and all the heavenly bodies orbit around attached to it with invisible ropes of wind. Directly below the pole star, and at the very center of the earth, lies Mount Meru. It is around Mount Meru that the sun, the moon, and the stars revolve." The mythology states that the stars, the heavenly bodies, exist below the summit of Mount Meru. This vertical system, which extends outwards, is to the Buddhists sometimes called Cakravala.
The world axis, or axis mundi, is the pillar talked about in various mythologies around the world. It expresses a point of connection between sky and earth at the very center of cosmology. At the axis mundi, travel and communication is made between the higher and lower realms. Mount Meru is the name of the Buddhist and Hindu axis mundi, but we also have the Greek Mount Olympus, the German Irminsul, the Persian High Hera, the Norse Yggdrasil.
The cosmic world tree Yggdrasil is supported by 3 roots. The third root extends to heaven, and beneath it is the very holy Well of Urd. The Norse heaven is called Asgard. There, a beautiful hall stands under the ash tree,
and a whole host of other world trees.
The Bhumandala disk represents the exoteric domains of the Earth and planets. In contrast, the cosmic axis, extending perpendicular to Bhumandala, is filled with esoteric meaning. It represents the path of ascent or descent of the soul. In addition to the orbits of the sun, moon, and planets, there are different worlds or lokas arrayed above Bhumandala along the cosmic axis. These upper worlds can be entered through mystic cities, and they are accessible only to persons of advanced spiritual consciousness. The Bhagavatam describes the vertical dimension of the Brahmanda as a universal form of God, extending from the lowest world at the soles of the feet to the highest at the crown of the head. In this traditional picture, we see the rings of Bhumandala forming the belt of the universal form. Here the positions of the worlds are indicated in relation to the universal form. The levels in the universal form are associated with the spinal chakras on which yogis meditate, and the spine itself is called Meru Danda, after Mount Meru, the cosmic axis. The ascent of the soul through different levels of the Brahmanda is analogous to the ascent of the life force through the chakras in the body. In general, the vertical dimension of the universe represents the path of ascent or descent of the soul through different worlds and different states of consciousness. It lies perpendicular to the plane of Bhumandala, which is the world of the planetary orbits.
This is not science fiction. This is the precise nature of a toroidal field. All energy in a toroidal field originates and funnels from the center, but does not and cannot leave for the toroid to remain intact. The heart is the seat of the soul, and this is where the body's toroidal field originates. Thank you for watching. I love you all.